Let me begin by kindly thanking Judith Butler for her invitation, as well as Rosie Braidotti, the chair of this session. And I hope she will help both me and you, mostly with some of Andy's comments about digital humanities and calculation. I wish to also thank Athena Athanasiou for her talk, the public institution defending what is yet to come, and of course Andy Parker for his text, The Measure of Digital Humanities, which is a sort of paraphrase of this title of this session. I wanted to write my response because it is faster and more precise, and because it would perhaps be more efficient in explaining the context or framework from where you two are posing your questions, that I pose a few questions and prod you to tell us once again something about your intentions. It seems that such an operation or a theater of operations could explain what is a critique or what is the status of critique within a group which has met or which meets from time to time. This is statut, critique, is mentioned by Derrida when speaking of critique vulgaire and distinctions in Bourdieu. So a group meets, in this case, above all thanks to Judith Butler, in order to constitute itself as a group, and the word consortium contains the Latin consort, sort is the partner or sharer. Further, it meets in Bologna in order to thematize the critical task of the university with a view, I quote, to support the study of critical theory in the university. This is from rationale of the conference. In order for any of this to happen, critical engagement, Athena uses this phrase several times. It is important for her text, and perhaps these words are synonymous. Perhaps there is a redundancy. For example, in Belgrade, we created a group for social engagement studies, and Adriana and Gazella, who founded it, are with us. Perhaps they can speak about that. That means in order for the study of critical theory to take place, critical engagement, or even just critique or engagement, must be immanent to this construction of consortium. How does critique happen in a group? Or what follows, what allows for it? Or what is its origin? Where is the critique? This is a question with which Athena does not deal, although there are a number of important questions to which I will return immediately. My answer could be straightforward. At issue is the issue of reflection, upon places before the others or before us. That means sometimes it is a judgment, the critique, or disputation, or neurosis, because upon everything, each one of us individually places before the others or before us. At this moment, Athena and Andy. A critique implies that we are part or a group body, and this is Universitas. Our word, this is Cicero's translating the Greek word katholon. He used this word 5 times, and this Universitas is opposed to the individual. That means that we are ever in crisis because we could at any time dissolve, that we are always reforming anew. That's why critique, and constructing ourselves as Universitas, and we construct some kind of totality of knowledge or plurality of various protocols of truth. Universitas is always necessarily et universum, et totum, et omne. This knowledge, totality of knowledge, or plurality of various protocols of truth is one paraphrase in opposition to Karl Jasper's opening line of his famous book, Die Idee der Universität from 1946, where he said that university has the task, that means that community of researcher and disciples search the truth in singular. Critique, then, if you want, destroys us, but simultaneously holds us together, because this capacity, because what is critique? Capacity to be critical, to critique, to question, to cause crisis, or this protocol is imminent to joint work and presence. In several places in his book from last year, Des Universels, Balibar mentions critique or discours critique or genre d'attitude critique, still tied to les catégories de l'universel, l'universalité, l'universalism, and he makes no mention of the university. But we can find, for example, in last period, several months ago, Jean-Claude Milner, very good definitions that explain what is the universal. Universal is like a road that carries the multiple towards the one by way of the everything. Towards the one by way of the everything. When I said that a group meets and examines why it has met and finally formulates a platform and announces a future meeting, for example, Judith mentioned yesterday the meeting in Rijeka next year, in Rijeka in Center for Advanced Studies, then simply by insisting on the words a group or a group of persons, I have placed the accent on what is usually labeled as the humanities. A university or consortium produces certain knowledge or complete knowledge. Example, what is critical theory, or what is models of digital humanities, or what is quantum, etc. But what is important simultaneously, it sometimes also produces a complete individual. That's why humanities, and that's Cicero would say man, complete man, or group of people, a kind of new university or new institution or counter-institution as imagined by Athena. The production of this kind of individual or plurality of individuals falls with the humanities. That means grammar, poetry, rhetoric, ethics, etc., which are also some of Cicero's protocols. Of course, critique or engagement is an instrument, and instrumentum and institution are synonymous in many texts, that constructs such a complete and well-formed man. Paradoxically, such an ideal man is such if and only if he or she can be a partner or sharer. That's the important. This already disqualifies leadership and inequality. We can easily detect that the ideal or humane researcher is not usually thought of within the boundaries of such categories to be a partner or to produce acts easily expanded by others. It seems that this is the very reason we have trouble constructing a group or a new universities or new Universitas or new and alternative humanities on which Athena and Andy insist, along with, of course, Rossi Braidotti. Critique that is insufficient or not constructive or false engagement or hypocrisy will result in the impossibility to construct the common, the joint, the university or Universitas. This is readily explained. We work for ourselves and not for others or for all. It seems much more efficient to me droning on Wendy Brown's text, Neoliberalism and the End of Liberal Democracy, which is over 10 years old now, to begin translate the word neoliberalism used by both Athena when speaking of neoliberalism or neoliberalism as a power of deinstitutionalization, and Andy in the connection between neoliberalism and calculation and computation. But behind this neoliberalism, we can find simply ego-profitable games that entirely neglect the common issue while incessantly speaking about it and incessantly putting it forward or advocating it. I do not understand why it is necessary to ever anew use this vague and overreaching word neoliberalism. Hence, and this is the first of my comments or criticism or questions, whichever, perhaps a small invitation to critique, of which we are several and I will list them, I think that it would be better to more sharply reconstruct some of our so-called theoretical paragons. Derrida and some of his constructions dominate both talks. In Athena's talk, a paradoxical institutionalist, Jacques Derrida, is mixed with a complete anti-institutionalist that was Michel Foucault. Foucault is a perfect example and origin of this, if you like, neoliberal theater, because he is only concerned with his own engagement, similarly Sartre. For him, as opposed to Sartre, who sometimes vacillates, there is no notion of collective work, collective action, or collective change. Could anyone imagine Foucault writing applications, formulating budgets, writing final reports of projects, or even simply asking for money for conferences, for joint work, or for others? Foucault works for himself and uses his perfect political connections throughout the various periods of his life quite well for his own positioning. Further, I am not convinced that his role in particular is important in the construction of the University of Vincennes. In other words, I would hold off from including Foucault in our task ahead. Let me say immediately, Judith knows that I am finishing a book of institutions, but I'm not here about all because I'm here because I lead, because I founded some institutions. I have founded some NGOs as a counter-institution, and in that sense, I follow Judith's actions or those Rosie's and always insist on a group. On the other hand, Derrida wrote applications, or at least wrote one. I am referring to the one regarding the Collège International pour la Philosophie, and his last published text could be a brief manifest for a new university or for a new consortium or institution. This is the text, Le modèle philosophique d'une contre-institution, where he gives 7 basic characteristics of counter-institution. For example, the counter-institution is not governmental in origin, it does not have war or resistance to any other institution as its mission. Then philosophy, although omnipresent, does not dominate over other disciplines. Then this counter-institution is always international. Then it does not confer honorifics or titles, academic or professionals. And always it ensures space for expertise and experimentation. And finally, we never know what awaits us in counter-institutional space, because it holds within itself pre-institutional space prior to norm. I know that Andy knows that in that text he mentioned many times this term incalculabilité, or incalculable. This, if we follow these articles constructed by Derrida, we can see that they are somewhat compatible with the founders of universities, with Humboldt and Schleiermacher. Thus, for example, I quote Schleiermacher, science must be a communal effort, or the state is expected to provide money and not interfere ever, in other words, to protect academic freedoms. Still, I am not sure that Derrida can offer precise answer we require today, nor that his place in both talks today is always justified. A few days ago, I was reading Du droit à la philosophie, and I am not sure that such writing, the hustle, intense, dithering, the amount of Heidegger, that all of that is quite necessarily any longer. perhaps some of this can be moved aside. It seems to me that Derrida's late text and seminars are far more significant as potentially new models or new protocols of engaged or committed writing. And Andy spotted they very well in using one of Derrida's late seminar. Derrida strongly colored Athena's text. The principal phrases or syntagmas is what is yet to come, or impossibility, possible impossibility, or impossible possibilities, many games in several Derrida's text, late Derrida text. But let us imagine that the crucial place in her text has not been answered the way she answered it with Derrida and Arendt, who are the providers of the answer to Athena's question. This question is here. I quote Athena, "Our questions are as follows. How do we critically engage the way in which institutions institute? And how can institutions be instituted differently? This is answer, I would argue that the critical performativity of working with or in the institution against the logic of institutionalization involves a twofold move. On the one hand, acting here and now, I quote, as if it were possible, this is Derrida, and the second, and on the other hand, posing again and again the question that Arendt was reported to have once asked. I quote Arendt, what will we lose if we win? My request to Athena would be that she take the question that gives shape and forms her brilliant text. There are a number of questions and suggestions in the text to which answers come from various theoretical predecessors, and that she answer it herself. The question, second, what will we lose if we win? I think actually that Arendt is paraphrasing Jaspers here, and for that question was answered already indirectly by Jaspers in the mentioned book. This book about the university is important to us, of course, as well as Habermas' text that reconstructs it, or indeed Parsons' Platts' 1973 book about the American university, because Jaspers several times insists on critique. For example, I quote, critique is the condition of life for the researcher or for the philosopher. Then self-critique, then substantive critique. In chapter 5, communication, the name communication, Jaspers speaks of disputation and discussion. The first implies victory, a break. When there is a victory, then the game is suspended. While, on the other side, discussion is something entirely different. Discussion, says Jaspers, has no end. There is no victory. Es gibt keinen Sieg. Everyone who happens to be right thus draws mistrust. Each result is but a step. Jedes Ergebnis ist nur Stufe. The next question or next invitation to answer, for example, much more specific and entirely outside Derrida's empty phrases and fictions, refers to the institution or to the university as an institution in a time that is entirely new. We know that Humboldt sometimes uses Universität and sometimes Anstalt. Anstalt was some kind of synonymous of institution. It is Humboldt who introduces this, I think, fictive dilemma that there is something interior and exterior of one organization. Not only does the university not have the strength to self-institutionalize or counter-institutionalize from within, that was which Habermas means when he says that new life to university can only come from outside, extramuros. This is a quote from his text from '84. But it has entirely, I quote Rosi, changed the institutional structure of the contemporary university because of the decline of the national state. The university in that case does not have its interior and exterior because it would appear that the relation between the imaginary idea of the university and the university as an institution has been disturbed. This is also paraphrase of Jaspers because according to Jaspers, the university is always concerned with the objective spirit. In the chapter 6, the named institution of the book, in which he speaks about the necessity of the institution, he says, I quote, "The university exists only to the extent that it is institutionalized. The idea becomes concrete into institution." Could I offer, seeing as we are in Bologna, otherwise I might not be able to, an alternative answer that differs from the first person that protects, with which Athena opens her text. This first, she said, I grew up, I had to go not only to, but also, and perhaps more significantly, beyond the university to be able to think and study together with others. Since I think we always has priority that I is only a weak form and is of secondary importance when it comes to protest, and since I'm institutionalist of the kind Saint-Just, or in English Saint-Just was not revolutionary Saint-Just, but the institutionalist, sometimes it is the same, but claiming that there is nothing outside the institution or that anything outside the institution does not exist, let me ask, does a counter-institutional and global association of students alone have a chance in a critical reform of the university? Does everything rest with the students? Let me remind you, in 1088 in Bologna, an association of students is called Universitas. It comprises 5,000 young people. It is an association that struggles, protects their interests, and to which the city authorities often give benefits because they demand them. Universitas in Bologna threatens the church and city that it will dissolve into mere individual destined to perish from this city. This Universitas in Bologna then has nothing to do with one in Paris that would a bit later, after Bologna, represent an association or collegium of students and professors. Finally, there is the question of corporation that is in one way or another tied to the institution and association and demands a new consideration. A corporation or incorporation is not, I think, by definition anything negative, but one of humanity's greatest inventions. It is necessary reconstruction of one of the main institutes of civil society. I assume you recall Hegel's reading of Adam Smith and his theory from the philosophy of right. Several times, Athena insists and opposes quite strongly, on one side, the critical self-reflexivity and dissident potential and corporative process, or on one side public institutions, and on the other side corporization and reactionary anti-humanities. The university, however, is a self-managed corporation. This is second sentence in Jaspers' book, Eine Korporation mit Selbstverwaltung. The corporation is here certainly more than a mere technical and juridical notion. A group of people that can maintain its togetherness in one place, like the group of students in Bologna all those centuries ago, or indeed like this group here today, if it wishes to truly exist and last, can do nothing other than learn together and produce knowledge. You can find in this learn together the word discipline, because discipline is a joint learning that produces and generates students. That's why Rosie put the time here. This is discipline. We must respect the time. Well, the group exists very briefly if it causes violence, if its members are partying at university party of the University of Bologna, or if they have breakfast together. But study and research, studium, is at the heart of any collective that is corporation. And the corporation, as a name and unity in name and aim, protects it through time. Just as this project and consortium protects certainly the money of foundation, of Mellon Foundation, or the hospitality of the University or Corporation of Bologna, tasks us with the reconstruction of corporate action and responsibility. This is the reason that liberalism or neoliberalism has produced and still produces certain forms of association that continue to be difficult to shift. Thank you very much.